The Dead Man's Playlist. A musician's murder, a series of cryptic mixtapes, and a detective who realizes he's listening to something he was never meant to hear. The murder of Dorian Nash. The rain was relentless that night, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. When Detective Ethan Graves arrived at Dorian Nash's apartment, he was met with the scent of old vinyl and something more metallic: blood. Nash, a once revered musician turned recluse, was slumped in his chair, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. The apartment was dim, lit only by the soft, dying glow of a neon sign outside. A cassette player on the desk clicked repeatedly, caught in an endless loop. The reel had run out, but it was still spinning, as if desperate to keep going. Officer Dana Langley, already at the scene, greeted Graves with a grim expression.
Looks like natural causes at first glance. No signs of a struggle.
Graves studied the body. Blood had pooled in Nash's ears, dark and unnatural. He crouched down, nudging the man's shoulder slightly. Nash's head lolled to the side, revealing dried streaks of red against his neck.
Natural causes don't make you bleed from the ears, Langley.
She exhaled sharply, shifting on her feet.
Yeah, figured you'd say that.
Then he saw the tape. A battered cassette sat in the player, its label barely readable beneath smudges of ink and time. Side A, echoes of the end. The mixtape messages begin. Back at the precinct, Graves stared at the cassette in his hands. It felt heavier than it should. He grabbed an old tape recorder from a shelf, one of the few left in the department. He slid the tape inside and pressed play. A low hum filled the room, followed by a few seconds of silence. Then, the music started. The first few songs were haunting, stripped-down versions of Nash's classics, recorded in an eerie, echoing space. Then, between two tracks, a voice crackled through the static. A whisper, muted, garbled.
Listen closely.
Graves frowned and rewound the tape, played it again.
Listen closely.
The voice was embedded beneath the song, almost as if someone had hidden it there. Langley leaned against the desk, arms crossed.
That's not part of the track, is it?
Graves shook his head.
No, someone put it there.
A cold sensation settled in his stomach. Days later, another murder. This time, a local DJ, found dead in his studio, slumped over his mixing board. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, just like Nash. And at the scene, another cassette. Side B, Cadence of the Dead. The pattern forms. The cases weren't connected by any logical means. Nash had been a recluse. The DJ was an up-and-comer. But the tapes, they were the common thread. Graves sat in his office, replaying the first tape for the 10th time. He had a legal pad full of scribbled notes, lyrics, timestamps, strange phrases whispered in the background. Then he heard something that made his stomach tighten, a new whisper, clearer this time.
Detective Graves, you're next.
His breath caught in his throat. Langley, sitting across from him, raised an eyebrow.
What is it?
Graves didn't answer immediately. He rewound the tape, played it again.
Detective Graves, you're next.
The whisper was still there. He finally looked up.
It said my name.
A living playlist. Graves wasn't superstitious. He believed in facts, in evidence. But the deeper he dug into Nash's past, the stranger things became. He met with an old music producer who had worked with Nash before his disappearance from the industry. The man, Harold Raines, was jittery, his fingers tapping erratically against his coffee cup.
Nash. He was working on something before he died. Said it was his masterpiece. But he got obsessed. Talking about frequencies that shouldn't exist. Sounds that do things to people.
Graves leaned in.
What do you mean, do things?
Raines swallowed hard.
I mean, people got sick. His audio engineer went missing. The record label buried everything. They said the album was lost, but I know better. They didn't lose it. They hid it.
Graves narrowed his eyes.
Why would they do that?
Raines gave him a haunted look.
Because if you listen to it long enough, it kills you.
The sound that kills. Graves tracked down the last known copy of Nash's abandoned album, hidden away in a storage unit. The reel-to-reel tape was labeled The Final Transmission. Langley hesitated as he placed it onto an old tape deck.
You sure about this?
Graves didn't answer. He pressed play. The music that played was unlike anything he had ever heard. The sound was layered, complex, filled with frequencies that made his skin crawl. Beneath the chords, whispers wove through the static, some too faint to decipher, others disturbingly clear. Then, his ears began to ring. Langley grabbed his arm.
Graves, you okay?
The pressure built, like something burrowing into his skull. He felt nauseous, dizzy. His vision blurred, then he understood. Nash had found a frequency that could kill, a sound that could rupture the brain. Someone had weaponized it. The final track. The last tape had yet to be found, but Graves knew where it would be, at the home of the next victim. He arrived at the address, his heart pounding. Inside, a man sat motionless in a chair, his eyes wide with terror. A reel-to-reel player spun nearby. The tape was already playing. Graves rushed to shut it off, but before he could move, the speakers crackled.
You should not have listened.
The voice wasn't Nash. It was himself. Langley's voice cut through the static.
Graves, we need to go now.
But he couldn't move. The blood in his ears, the ringing. It had already started. The sound of silence. The case was solved. The tapes weren't messages from a killer. They were Nash's warnings. He had discovered something he was never meant to create. A frequency that could kill, hidden in his music like a ghost in the static. He had tried to contain it, to bury it. But someone had found his old recordings and turned them into weapons. Graves had heard too much. As he dropped to his knees, blood dripping from his ears, the last tape clicked to a stop. Langley shook him.
Graves, stay with me.
But the world fell silent. And then, click, rewind, play.